Over to me then. Thank you. All you need is love. Yeah, I think, like Stuart said, that for a long time, of course, that was just, of course, part of that 60s thing. All you need is love, and what a great song. But we do know that the Beatles actually spent a lot of time in the East and studying Eastern mysticism and philosophy, and it changed the way that they approached the world. So it wasn't all just about getting out there and making joyful for noise, but actually making a difference. And so when I've been thinking about this, is all you need is love. Is that all we need? Could we, if we took that on board, would we actually make the difference that we would like to make in the world? I know in the book that you've been studying with Leslie and that I used in the retreat that we did here last year with the work, the channeled wisdom of Jesus, that was so much about that was about love. How do we put love in action? That it's not just an emotional thing that we might have towards other people, but an actual power that we use. And of course, that's part of our unity teachings, isn't it? That this is a power, not just an emotional response that we might have to something. This is a power that we can use. And so pondering this idea is, well, is that all we need? And I know last week in the session that Stuart did with you, he talked about actually that when we teach it in unity about pairing it with wisdom. And I was having a look at the disciples that represent those two powers, wisdom and love. And Stuart gave you a wonderful explanation of why John is the disciple depicting love. Well, James, his brother, John's brother, is the one for wisdom. So that's interesting, isn't it? They're brothers. So maybe we need to have them close together. They're closely aligned. And I've really appreciated the work that um, Reverend Letty Hammock did with Sue Riley in bringing together. So, who are the women in the Bible who represent these powers for us? So, if the one for wisdom is Salome, and Salome is the mother of James and John. And if you remember Stuart saying that John was the son of thunder. Well, both of these boys were sons of thunder. And so you get an idea that maybe they were pretty rambunctious and tearing around and maybe a little out of control, perhaps, bringing chaos wherever they went. Well, Salome, in her wisdom, said they should go together. If they were going to, one of them was going to go with Jesus, they should both go. And we know that many times when Jesus would go up to the mountain to pray, who did he take with him? He took James and John, love and wisdom. So it's like, oh, so maybe this is something for us to take on board is that these two need to be closely together when we're making decisions, when we're doing things. Because from our love center, from that place in us, that's where we have these. It is a feeling. It's a feeling of wanting, a feeling of, our desires. We want more. Has anyone else, or am I the only one who's experienced that? I want more. Of course, I used to think about that was meant I want more stuff. And when I sensed that I didn't have enough stuff, that was how it manifested itself. But as I've gone along, I guess, in the journey, I'm kind of getting a sense of, oh, that more is about experiencing more of life, experiencing more of the beauty of what we have around us. We just had Earth Day the other day, and wasn't that a great reminder of going, oh, yeah, we have such beauty. We have this fragile planet. And of course, the astronauts have been talking about that again from their experience of seeing this blue planet that perhaps we don't treasure enough sometimes and don't necessarily give it as much attention and as much love as we need to. So all we need to do, all we need is love. And I was thinking about that phrase also that Stuart explored with you last time, love thy neighbor as thyself. And of course, he gave that the example of the Good Samaritan, who is my neighbor. But I really like to have a look at that little word, love thy neighbor as thyself. I'm wondering whether so many of the things that go wrong in neighbors, between neighbors, between people, is coming from a place because we don't love ourselves enough. We don't love ourselves perhaps at all. I'm reminded of a woman who came and talked to us at Unity of Greater Portland when we were living in Maine, Denise, and she had stage 4 throat cancer. And she had gone through major treatments and had the tumor cut out of her neck. And part of her healing process excuse me, part of her healing process was that she would every morning she would get a pen and she would say, "Dear Pin, pain in neck." So her dear Pin, what do I need to know? What is it? What's the message that I need to hear? And she would wait and she would get a message. She would hear something or she would get a feeling. And she said consistently, it was about, Denise, you don't love yourself. You don't love yourself. And so her practice became to stand in front of the mirror and say, I love you. Denise, I love you. And she painted her lips bright red and kissed the mirror so that her mirror had lots of lipstick marks all over it. But she healed herself. She had been a singer, so with her throat cancer, she hadn't been able to sing. And one of her desires was that she saw that if she could heal herself, she would get to sing again. And she did, and she was able to sing at a baseball venue in Boston, Fenway Park, the where the Boston Red Sox would play. So she practiced this, and I was struck too when I was listening to Desmond Bishop Tutu talking, and he said one of the things that has really struck him in life is how many people have difficulties in their life because they don't love themselves. They don't value themselves. I remember seeing a kid once. He was getting up to mischief. He was doing stuff, and you'd want to clock him, because he was like, oh, come on. And then he did it to himself. He was hitting himself, saying, "Stupid kid, I'm a no rubbish kid." And I was like, "Oh my God, where has he got that message from? How has, it broke my heart that someone who was growing up with that. But doesn't it make you wonder whether a lot of the troubles that we see in the world when people are, what we call it, acting out, maybe is coming from that place? They're actually not loving themselves. I saw this amazing illustration once from the psychiatrist, psychologist, I can't remember, but he drew this circle and he said, at the point when you do something, he was talking about domestic violence, actually. He said, at the point where someone has hit someone else or damaged someone else, done something, he said that is the very moment when they have to stop and go, I love myself just as I am. Now, doesn't that seem like, what? How can you love yourself at that moment when you have kind of transgressed? But he said, otherwise, what happens is they feel guilty. So someone's done something, and the guilt, right? You're going around the circle. And he said, guilt always seeks its own punishment. So what's the best punishment? Get you to do it again. He said the only way of breaking the cycle was to for people to actually love themselves at that point. How many of us can do that? I mean, when I mess up, and I don't know about you, but I mess up. I say things sometimes, I snap, I do some things that I'm not proud of. Um, I don't find it easy to at that moment to say I love myself just as I am. Do you? And yet maybe that is our work. Maybe that is what we need to do. Love myself just as I am. Makes you think, doesn't it, about what's going on, not just in relationships, but in our own bodies. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, was a great example of changing her thinking about her own body when she had previously been considered it weak. She'd considered herself to be um, sickly. That was how she used to describe herself, that she would be sickly, she would die young. That was her belief. Um, and then she started this process of loving her body and sending love thoughts. You can, and this idea that you can actually send love, you can send love to places where it's needed in our own bodies, to other people who might be problematic for us. I call it love bombing. I've got here, you might not be able to see this, but this is a little what do they call them? Pom pom. So I made this pom pom because I had someone here in the village where we live who was, what would you say, troublesome. And most people were going, she's done this again. There would be moans and groans about what she had done. And so I just thought, I I can't buy into this anymore. I'd been one of them. Truthfully, I had been in my heart, even if I hadn't been saying it, I had been feeling this angst towards this woman. And so I made this pom pom and I said to the leadership here, I said, we're going to use this and we're going to love bomb her because otherwise we're hate bombing her. And when Stuart was talking last week, he said about how love is an attracting power. It has a magnetic power. It pulls things towards you. Well, the thing is that hate, or we think the opposite of that will push things away. It doesn't, because it's the same energy, right? It's the same power that we're sending out, and we think, oh, I'm not going to love that person. I have had a couple of people saying, oh, I'm not going to love her. Um, well, what happens? They're still getting some of the crap. Oh, am I supposed to say that on here? Probably not. Anyway, they are. And so, love bombing. I remember years ago when we first came back from Maine, we were living in on a hillside in Lower Hutt, in just across the harbour from Wellington. And our next door neighbour, old Barry, he's a great guy. We loved him. We saw lots of him. But he had this habit of every day Tuesday, every week on Tuesday, which was rubbish day. He didn't put his rubbish out to be picked up by the rubbish men. He burnt it in his fireplace. And if you can picture, we're on a hillside. So we're up here, Barry's down there. His chimney comes right up to our deck, right? So he burns his rubbish. Well, I tell you, I don't know what he was burning, but it was made my eyes run and my throat burn. It was like toxic stuff. It was terrible. And we remembered that before we went away, we go, oh yeah, he used to do that. But of course, we didn't notice because we were both working in town. So on Tuesday nights when we get home, we go, oh yeah, Barry's been burning. But it was just a whiff by then. But now I was home. I wasn't. going off to town every day for work. And so the stuff was coming up and filling our house. I have to close all the windows and the doors. Still, it was horrible. And he, in the 10 years that we'd been away, he'd been asked by each of our tenants if he could stop this foul practice. But no, he insisted that it was his right to do this, and he carried on. And we got to the point, John actually said, I'm going to get the hose out and put it down his chimney. Like, yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work. Anyway, I had that thought then was, oh, I'm just going to send love over the balcony down onto Barry's house. And so I just kept doing that, just throwing these kind of love bombs over the balcony. And it wasn't long before he actually came up to me at one stage and he said, Does my burning rubbish bother you? Yep, it does. And so after that, he always made sure either the wind was going the other way so it wouldn't bother us, or he would check if I was going to be out. Um, and so what could have ended up being a really nasty situation resolved itself rather well. So we do have this power. I'm not sure whether Stuart shared this with you last week. I think he might have. Divine love lives through me as harmony, compassion, and understanding. We have that power, don't we? We can change things. It's like a spiritual ointment. Spread it out, spread it over things that are not going well, and just see if that might bring that harmony, might bring some understanding, some change. When we think about, sometimes we maybe fear what's going on, and fear asks, doesn't it? How can I protect myself? How can I, wall myself off from what might be coming? But love asks a different question. How do I align with the deepest truth of what I am? Because indeed, aren't we love? Made in the image and likeness, we often say that God is love. So we are made in that image and likeness, love, love which incorporates perhaps all those other powers that we talk about. Bring them all together into that one place. William Walsh talks about when we send love to somebody else or into part of our body, if it needs healing, we can do the same thing. He said it's like radiation treatment. Wow, isn't that got power to it? Send that love and see how it changes things. So all you need is love. Well, maybe we do. Maybe that is all we need. I want to read something to you from, now that we don't get the book version of Daily Word, I've been using this, the Book of Awakening. It's a tome by Mark Nepo, actually that Kelly Isler introduced me to. So that's my morning reading is that now, because I don't get the Daily Word until later in the day. Same with you, I guess. Um, so love like water. This is a reading from the other day. Only love with no thought of return can soften the point of suffering. Water in its clear softness fills whatever hole it finds. It's not skeptical or distrusting. It does not say this gully is too deep or that field is too open. Like water, the miracle of love is that it covers whatever it touches, making the touched thing grow while leaving no trace of its touch. True, the faces of shores and the arms of cliffs are worn to bone. But this is beyond the water's doing. This is the progress of life, of which water is but an element. So let's just take a moment to take into a place of quiet where all we need is love. And I'm wondering whether perhaps all we need to remember is that we are love, that you are love. So I invite you to settle, settle into where you are and take a few deep breaths. You don't have to change anything, but just allow some softness. Allow yourself just to be in a space of maybe questioning, is all I need is love? Or maybe all I need to remember is that I am love. And we take the idea that I love myself just as I am as our spiritual work. For no matter what the circumstance, what the situation, maybe love is the answer. When you feel ready, bring yourself back to this time and space. And look around and you'll see lots of faces of love. You are love. Thank you, Stuart.